Bolovinaka Namaste and welcome to Her Story. I'm Temalesi Vono and today I'm joined by Fiji Council of Social Services Executive Director Vani Catanasiga, who for many years has been very instrumental in a lot of community groundwork. She overlooks 24 District Council of Social Services in Fiji. She's helped many families who have gone through hard times, and tonight we will learn more about what makes Vani. Thank you so much, Vani, for joining me on this show. Maybe we can just start off with, who is Vani Catanasiga?
Inaka. And, it's great to be on your show. Vani is, I'm from Bua. I'm from a district called Lekutu. The village is called Votua, and that's like at the border of Maduata and Bua, so on the other side on the main highway. My mom's from Benga, which is the island of firewalkers, and I have three siblings. In fact, there's four of us. I'm the youngest, and often considered the brat in the family. I mostly grew up in Suva. My parents worked here in Suva, and when we came of age, we were all sent off to boarding school. But my family home in Cunningham was always full of cousins that had come from the village for an education, full of relatives who were transiting perhaps, to other places. My childhood memories are filled with lots of laughter and lots of family memories, struggles too. My parents had initially set up, put down roots, elsewhere, and then they moved to Cunningham. So I was born, somewhere in transition to Cunningham. I was born in Wenivula, and then they finally bought a property in Cunningham. And when we got to Cunningham, it was still like bushes. But there were people there, pioneering families in Cunningham, and I'm really glad to say that some of them are still there. My dad was by the time I was born, my dad was very involved in church and very involved in the Vono. He was particularly, invested in the Sunday school ministry at Cunningham, and our church was called Windakua Methodist Church. I had both, my Bua cousins and my Mbenga cousins at home. We grew up together, so I was exposed to a lot of the Vono events, gatherings, functions, and so that shaped a lot of what I was. But my siblings used to complain about me all the time because I would, instead of doing my chores, I would hide a book and go and read, and they'd complain about having to, have the lights on because I'm still reading. Right. So I'm pretty sure they were glad to see me, sent off to boarding school at about 13. And that wasn't something new because all of my siblings had to go through boarding school. I remember that going into boarding school as someone who grew up in Suva, I got to meet, girls from perhaps islands and rural areas, and it was my first exposure to people who had come from outside of Suva, outside of urban centers. I mean, I know that I was exposed to relatives coming in, but it was the first time that we lived together with the other young girls that I wasn't related to. So it was a good education for me, getting to know them. They sent me to ACS for an education, according to the frameworks that they have there. Yes. But I think 50% of the education was also the young women that were there with me. I think I made lifelong friends there, who continue to be part of my life now. Yeah. Being at home with my mom and dad, when we came home for the holidays, me and my siblings back from boarding school, there are always functions happening at home, Vono functions. And so I got to know, about duty, got to learn about duty to your Vono. My dad came from a Sauturanga family, and, these are people who have been given the responsibility, perhaps as I would say they provide that supporting role to chiefs. They also appoint chiefs, right? And on my mom's side, they were Matani Vono or heraldsmen.
So you grew up in a very communal, safe setting. You have your extended families who would come over and spend days at home. You have songos. I think that built up the confidence in you when you were growing up. Or when did the confidence start?
I think over the years, I'd attribute that to faith, just when you know who you are, knowing who you are in the Vanua and knowing who you are in terms of where your community is perhaps 30-40%. Challenging periods, including getting married very early, having 2 children, having to drop out of school, and dealing with, even in my marriage, alcoholism and other factors. And then having to live through a period like 1987, I was 7 years old, and I remember memories of that in attending primary school and seeing soldiers walk past. So all of that, when you've lived through 2 coups and you have vivid memories of this, and then when you're working and then the 3rd or the 4th coup happens, I think it takes a toll on people, particularly if you've been growing up in an environment where values are emphasized. And it forces you to take a position. Like, what can you excuse? What do you not excuse, right? And because my dad passed away in 2005, I think post 2006, I would ask my mom, why are we going through this? This is not fair on this generation. And she would try to explain it, and I say, you should have resolved this in your time, in your generation. Why should we deal with it? Why should my children have to deal with it? So that, and my mom wasn't defensive. She tried to explain as best as she could. And in those times, I wished my dad was there, because my dad was a person who, even though he was an engineer, he was person who read a lot. He read a lot of these biblical, books that were written by pastors and all of that. And he helped me to see the world through these lenses, social justice and all of that stuff. And we were exposed very early to Stephen R. Covey, the 10 Habits of Highly Effective People. Don't sweat the small stuff. All these books that he would buy on his work trips, and he'd come back and he'd force us to read. I was not good at maths, so he got tired of trying to get extra tutoring and all that, and he said, I think it's to do with your attitude. So he bought me all these books on attitudes. So all of that, that really made an impression upon my life. I think those were the foundational principles for why I do what I do today. So 2006, by the time 2006 came, I was like, no, not again. But I was working in government by then. So I had moved, from mainstream media. I had worked as a journalist.
You worked at Daily Post. That was your first
Daily
media?
Post, yes, 2001, because I was in uni 2000 when the coup happened. And then I joined Fiji Times in 2003. It was a privilege to work at Fiji Times because it allowed me to write, to perhaps apply my values on telling the stories of the vulnerable. Telling the stories of the vulnerable. But I remember they sent me somewhere to do a coverage on flooding, because there was flooding that was happening like a whole month. I had gone to Temalesi, Wenimbuka, to do some coverage, and they were still fixing the roads then, because when you went to Wenimbuka back then in 2003, the roads were still being, done, because if not, you would have to travel through dusty roads and all of that. But I had witnessed a lot of losses, and there was a family that I went to interview. They had lost their son, a young child, and when we went there, the younger sibling or the older sibling who was with the child was crying, and then I thought, man, what a burden to lay on a child, that he was with his younger sibling when he was washed away. So I had been doing coverage the whole week, and then I ended up in Narere, I think towards the end of the week, and there was a young family, And they were relating how they survived the flood that came that night. They lived in a hut, and the only brand new thing in that house was a fridge. It was like just a small room. But they had like a 2-month-old baby, and they didn't know how to swim. So it got to a point where the father was barely 21, and he was holding the baby up like this. The water had gotten to this level, and he was holding up the baby was crying. So I think at that story I just broke down, and I was a journalist. You're not supposed to cry or show emotion. So I thought to myself, I can't be writing about vulnerability. I want to do something about it.
To help, eh?
That was the day I made the decision I need to exit the media, because I cannot continue to write about injustices because it's affecting me this way.
Yes.
And I wanted to do something about it. So it was almost, like I said, man, Lord, you have a funny sense of humor, because now you've put me into an organization that deals with disaster response. And so...
well, speaking of sense of humor, just you spoke about your late father. Now, in 3 words, if he was still here with us in the room, what 3 words would he use to describe you before we go on a short break?
He would probably call me he taught us to fight injustices. He would probably still call me a brat, but yeah, I hope he knows that I do this because that's what he trained me to do. Yeah. But, my father was, it made having a father like that help me to understand who God is, to relate to God as a father. And that's probably where my confidence comes from, because I see God as my father. And yeah, I think that my dad would say that, yeah, I think you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, using the gifts that God gave you to make the world a better place.
But one thing's for sure, if he was still here with us, we'd be very proud of you and your work. Well, this is her story. I'm Temalesi Vono. Join us again after this.
Every day, thousands of Fijians turn to one place to know what is happening, for the stories that matter, for the moments that bring us together, for the news you trust. Recognized by BBC Media Action Research as one of Fiji's most trusted news sources, that place is Fiji Village. And because Fiji keeps moving, so do we. We've listened to how you read, watch and listen, what you love, what you want more of, and what could simply be easier. And now the wait is over. The new Fiji Village website is now live. Built with you in mind, made smarter, made faster, made for the way you connect with us every day. No more searching for your favorite videos. Watch Now brings everything together in one place, ready when you are. Missed your favorite radio show? Head to Listen, your home for live radio, podcasts and audio content whenever it suits you. Sports fans can now get live scores faster with our new scoreboard feature. Need a story explained? Ask AI is there to help as well. And reading late into the night? Switch on dark mode and scroll in comfort. The same trusted news now with a smarter, easier experience built for you. Fiji Village, your trusted news provider.
Welcome back to Her Story. I'm Temalesi Vono, and I'm with Vani Catanasiga, the Executive Director for Fiji Council of Social Services. Vani, before we went on a short break, you spoke a little bit about all the challenges you faced from when you started in as a journalist, until now. Can you just walk me through those challenges you faced in your life?
Yeah, I was actually had 2 little children. I was married, and we had an agreement with my ex-husband that okay, you're going to go to work and I'm going to look after the kids. And so, for him to do that was a great sacrifice, and I appreciated that. I think he understood that, you know, that I had this close affinity to social justice, you know. And in his own way, he would he would talk about some of what was happening right in front of me, because by then I had, you know, we were living together, and there were things happening right there in his neighborhood that I wasn't even aware of, and he had his way of introducing me to the injustices of the system. He had friends who were in trouble with the law, so yes. I had, you know, that real life exposure, because, you know, if you like, my upbringing was a bit, you know, where I was protected, but getting married exposed me to all of these other issues that I might have been unaware of.
You got married quite young, eh?
Yes, but, you know, at this point in my life, they're like my fashion advisor, my life coach, you know.
The perks of having a daughter.
Yes, and there are times when I'm walking out the door, I'm already like the taxi is waiting, and my daughter would go, "Hey, come, I look at you, put some color on your face," you know. Like, they know I don't like putting on makeup, but they're like, "Put a color on your face, mommy, look boring." Like that day you appeared on TV, it was just like, you know, that sort of advice. Unsolicited, yes. So, I mean, it's great to have daughters, although I'm divorced.
Vani, your divorce. I've also been through, well, my first or my only divorce, and it wasn't easy. Was it easy for you, or was it?
Not at all.
Was it not?
I don't think any divorce is easy, you know. I think that, you know, for any woman, you know, in any context, finds that difficult process. It was difficult, very difficult for me. This was someone I had shared half of my young adult life with. For most of the time, you know, he was very supportive and very encouraging to my, you know, my journey. But we married young, so, you know, we were perhaps unready for the responsibility and the sacrifices and the compromises that had to happen. I would say I would own, you know, that majority of it was my fault, because I spent a lot of time, you know, I was concerned about all of these injustices that were happening, and he was concerned for my safety, you know, and I wasn't paying attention to my safety at all, because I just felt this injustice, and I felt enraged by it, and I needed to do something about it. And he was concerned that this was happening in a time that the military was in charge, and he didn't want me exposing myself to that risk, because he didn't want to explain to my daughters. Yes. And yeah, I think if you look at our 2013 photos where we were protesting in front of State House, you can see like my ex-husband standing at the back looking really worried. Yes. I was the first one to be dragged into the bus, you know, police bus, and, you know, my aunts came after that, and Auntie Susi, Tisawau, a few others, Priscilla Singh, were arrested for protesting during the assenting of the Constitution. I think that you know, a lot of those scenes happened over the years, and it was difficult at first, but I'm really happy that God has brought us to a point where we have managed to reconcile. We sat with the kids, the two girls, last year, and we just sought forgiveness from each other, you know, and it was a really great process. And you know, when it initially happened, you know, that fracture that happens, you know, you don't know how to deal with it, but I thank God, because, you know, one thing that I can share is that, you know, apart from the family support and the friends coming, you know, to support me, God allowed for a time for us to be apart, you know, to just take time out from each other. And then He provided a time for us to come back and to seek forgiveness from each other. And it was during my daughter's 21st birthday, the younger one, that we got together as a family. We talked about it, and then we sought forgiveness from each other. And I'm really happy about where I am right now. I'm just trying to do what God has called me to do. And I am, there are times when he makes contact with the kids, and I'm happy with where he is. And divorce doesn't have to be the end of our lives, and so many times in this context we are condemned as divorced women, but being divorced doesn't mean God has discarded you. God continues to use brokenness to, or perhaps things that are considered weak, to demonstrate to those who have power that he holds power, that God holds power. He uses people who are broken, who are vulnerable, who are voiceless, because he can't act through strong and strong people and strong things. It is through weakness that he demonstrates his greatness, and that's what drives me. So I go into spaces where I know that I am judged, but that's okay. That's for God to deal with. I just have to do his will. So I'm glad that his family continues to remain connected to my children. I think they managed to visit their village. I think 3 years ago, that my daughters were very excited. I was excited for them. Divorce isn't the end. Divorce doesn't mean discarded.
Of course. As the Executive Director of Fiji Council of Social Services, has there been moments where people say, I'll just put it bluntly, she can't do this, you can't do this because you're a woman. You need to leave this to another man. Has that ever happened to you?
Yes, yesterday it happened.
Yesterday it happened. Well.
But you see, I've gotten so used to it.
Right.
I say, like I'm just doing what God has called me to do, right? If you don't agree, that's on you. But I have to be obedient. I don't want to be a Jonah in a whale.
Of course.
Right? So people may not understand that. But it doesn't matter whether you're female or male. What God has called on you, has put on you to do, you have to do. It doesn't matter whether you're female or male. Like I don't consider that a factor until somebody has said, you can't do it, but you're going to marama. And I said, oh.
Okay, what happened yesterday?
No, it's a long story. We appeared before the Public Accounts Committee, and then they said you can't do this thing, and that's one of thousands of times that I have received that criticism, and it's sad because like in this society, there's so much that women can do and are already doing, but because of that mentality, they're not tapping onto a strength that exists in our communities. Yeah, one thing I want to say first and foremost, you will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. You will fail in some moments. But that's not the end. You have to build from there. There are people who will condemn you for being a woman. Okay? That's expected. Don't lose sight of the vision when that happens. Yeah, continue to forge on. Some of that criticism will come from men and some of it will come from females. Continue nonetheless. Yeah, your strength doesn't come from those people. It comes from your maker. So remain connected to God. For those of you who hold faith, who have faith, or have a faith system, continue to remain rooted in that, because it's going to be a tough journey. I'm not going to lie. It's going to be a tough journey. But you keep your eyes on that vision and you remain rooted in God, and you will fulfill what God has put on your heart to do.
Well, thank you so much, Vani. That was a very exciting session for me. I'm sitting down here, I'm actually learning a lot from you, and I hope our viewers at home are learning as well. Well, this is Her Story. I'm Temalesi Vono. Thank you so much, Vani, for joining me on this show. And please do join us in the next fortnight. Mother.